All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm so excited. We will be talking today about Fusion Fundraisers, a hybrid event experience and best practice roundtable discussion. Today, our topic is all things AV, live streaming, and tech, specifically geared towards upcoming hybrid or what we're calling fusion fundraisers and events. I'm so glad you chose to be with us today because we have so much amazing content to cover and discuss. But first, I'm Misty Markham. I'm the founder and principal auctioneer doing benefit and fundraising at Marquam Auction Agency. And, before we get started, I'm about to tell you what we're going to do today, but I just want to kind of define very loosely what a fusion fundraiser is, what we're talking about when we say hybrid. And we're defining it as any fundraising event where there is an element of an in-person crowd plus a live stream show that streams to some sort of a virtual crowd. And that can be, a whole bunch of things, but loosely, that's what we're talking about today. So today's goals, my goals for you are to define what a fusion fundraiser is in terms of our fabulous guests that we have with us today. We're going to discuss some of the differences and variations of them and define what you need to successfully execute one of your own. Finally, we'll go over the frequently asked questions that all of our tech providers and myself have been getting asked a lot. And we'll go over some things to consider. And finally, at the end, we will get the skinny on pricing, which is probably the big question of the day, as well as end with a few minutes of Q&A. So to facilitate an in-depth, knowledgeable, super practical, and insightful conversation today, I knew that today's roundtable needed AV rock stars. So I took the liberty of inviting 3 local AV companies, my good buddies and tech partners for events, to join us. So full disclosure, we have worked with each of our panelists on virtual and or in-person events, so we can speak to their professionalism, their expertise, and their final deliverables from a personal and professional experience. And what I'm here to say is they're all amazing. So please look into them. I'm going to invite each one of them to introduce themselves to you right now and tell us a little bit more about what they do and anything of interest. So our first up today is Brad Wager from Wager Audio. And Brad, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Misty. I mean, this was an exciting thing to be a part of, just with so many folks, working to craft these event experiences. We're excited to be a part of the conversation and to, share our background. So I'm the founder of this business. We provide full service audiovisual support for a wide variety of events, support concert events, and all sorts of unique things during the summer. So thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. And with that, thank you, Brad. Please meet our next panelist today. We've got Todd Campbell from the AV department with us. And Todd's got a lot of experience doing this. Todd, say hello. Oh, except for Todd's still on mute.
Hi there, Misty. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this. My name's Todd Campbell. I founded the AV department in 2015 to basically accomplish some of my partner's goals of a high quality production at a reasonable price. And so we created our concept of fully deployed, fully complete packages. And we were actually doing some of this fusion, as you call it, since 2017, and have migrated to full virtual throughout the COVID pandemic, obviously. And yeah, like everyone else, we're getting ready to go back. And what does that look like? I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, I'm excited to hear too. And last but certainly not least is our friend Laurel Miller from Seamless Event Solutions. Welcome, Laurel.
Hi, thank you. I'm Laurel. I'm the owner and CEO of Seamless Event Solutions. We are an audiovisual services provider based in Portland, although we say we'll meet you anywhere. So we work all over the place, but we've certainly been Portland based for the last year completely with virtual events, and had the fun of working with Misty and her crew quite a bit. I definitely recommend doing that if you can, because they're a lot of fun to be around. And I'm excited to be here today because once again, we find ourselves in the position of building the plane and flying it at the same time. And so I think I'm going to learn just as much as I have to share.
Right on. Well, thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Brad. Thank you all for being with us today. For you attendees, the panelists' contact information was on their slides. So if you'd like to contact them directly with tech questions, you want to discuss your event, whatever, please do so. I know they'd be really happy to hear from you. And also, attendees, viewers, please pose any and all questions as they pertain to planning or hosting a Fusion fundraiser as we go today through the chat. We'll save some time at the very end to try to answer as many as we have time for. But right now, I'd like to transition us to our first poll of the day. And keep in mind, your answers will help guide today's conversation. So please take a moment now to riddle me this. Are you considering a hybrid event or a Fusion fundraising style event sometime in 2021? And if yes, what is your biggest worry, your biggest pain point, or your biggest concerns? Please answer the poll first and then drop any additional answers in the chat. We will definitely look through those and look forward to your answers. But I know I've been talking to a ton of people about Fusion fundraisers and hybrid events right now. They're trying to decide if they want to do one, if they want to stick with virtual, if they want to go back to in person. But you know, let's get a little bigger, broader overview of what all of you say. So Anush, when we're ready to reveal our poll results, let's take a peek. Look at this. Overwhelmingly, 67% of you are planning on hosting a Fusion fundraiser or a hybrid event in 2021, with only 13% saying no and 21% being on the fence. So it could be up over 80%, almost 90% of you would be potentially doing a hybrid event this year. That's incredible information to know, and it's very important for us. So we better get real good at doing these. So what I'm going to do is go through some frequently asked questions, and I'm going to address them to any of our panelists. The first one, I'm going to allow you each 30 seconds to please answer in your own words. What is a hybrid event? This is our first one. Can you speak to why they're relevant, what they are, maybe discuss some variations, and discuss who might be the best audience to consider doing one for? And Brad, I'm going to let you in 30 seconds try to give your best shot at that one.
Awesome. So yeah, I would say that a hybrid event would be bringing in an audience that's both in person and watching from home. You know, I think the best group to consider that is somebody who has, you know, a lot of people that are out of town, you know, people who cannot simply be here. You know, we've seen board members and various folks, you know, move away from the area. And so there's been a lot of opportunity to grow the reach of an organization. So I think that's a great fit, you know, especially if you've got a planning committee and a group that can make a really nice, tight production, then a hybrid could really be a good fit for you as we see things safe to open up and bring people together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. Todd, what do you say to what is a hybrid event, and maybe discuss some variations and who might be a good audience to consider doing one for?
I suppose to me, a hybrid event would include an in-room and virtual audience participating in some sort of activity concurrently, and also have the ability to bring someone outside into the room as well as the room outside.
I love it. Succinct. Way to go, Todd. Thank you. And finally, Laurel, tell us what you think a hybrid event is, and maybe discuss some variations and who you think would be a good audience for one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I definitely started out at the point of thinking, oh, it's a concurrent viewing or participation in an event from an in-person and a remote audience. But as we're thinking things through and trying out different formats, and like you have the fusion concept, you know, my thinking on what hybrid could mean has certainly stretched. And I think, especially right now, a hybrid approach is really good for any group that is willing to have people meet in person. I think that's the limiting factor right now is what's the risk profile and what is the tolerance of your attendees to meet in person. There's certainly a lot of desire. I know I personally can't wait to get back to in-person events. And so being able to come together is such a special thing, and hybrid allows you to have that, as well as accommodate people who maybe aren't comfortable, or as Brad said, are out of town or have moved, to expand your reach. It's a great point.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all of your responses. And attendees, if you're watching, remember to please drop all questions into the chat as we go. We'll answer them near the end. Thank you. That was question number 1. Our most frequently asked question number 2 is, do you recommend doing both the in-person event and the live stream event on the same day at the same time, like simultaneously, right? And Todd and Laurel, I'm going to let you address this one. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to do it. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll address that.
Okay.
Not being a fundraising professional or a scripter, I tend to leave those types of decisions to those that are. I think each audience is going to be different. Each client's going to be different. And what works for one may not work for another. So I don't think there's necessarily a blanket answer for that.
Yep, good answer. What about you, Laurel?
Yeah, I guess all things being equal, I would say yes, it would be great to do them all at the same time, but to do them all at the same time well is a larger budget than probably what a lot of people are used to, and certainly more than only an in-person budget. And being at home for the last year or so, people attending virtual events have developed some expectations, and to be able to meet those expectations as well as the in-person audience expectations, it requires a lot of planning and forethought. But I love the idea of being able to gather in a group and experience something all at the same time, even if not everyone could be there in person.
I totally agree with you. And I'm going to piggyback on that, Laurel, and just say, from a fundraising perspective, I would say you have to kind of really know your demographic and make sure that you're catering to your major donors and where you are getting the most money from. Make sure you're giving them the experience that they want, because you can also do a virtual event and an in-person event like a week apart, and then really focus on each one and make each one the experience that you're hoping to do. So, really we're only limited by our own creativity anymore and our budget. So thank you, Todd and Laurel, for your responses. Again, drop any questions you've got into the chat. We're going to move on to FAQ number 3, which is, what do you need in order to successfully execute a fusion fundraiser or a hybrid event? And before I'm going to ask you, I would say vision. You have to have a vision of what you want, and you've got to have somebody that knows what they're doing on the tech end. In addition to that, I would say you've got to have some sort of a planner or a guide to help you plan for both of the event experiences, because they're totally different. Then it's easy to miss something. So Brad, Todd, Laurel, I'm going to give you each 30 seconds. Brad, what do you need in order to successfully execute a fusion fundraiser or a hybrid event? Anything that I missed?
For me, I feel like one of the most critical things is having, a host, an auctioneer, obviously having a team that's really has the vision in mind, based on the way you want to script it, the way you want it to play out. If you've got folks on camera who are going to take it in another direction and you're going to lose, it's going to go off the rail, that might be fun in person, but really doesn't present well online. I think that's the biggest thing. So if you really have that collective piece where that your hosts and MCs want to create a nice tight program and a tight package, I think that's probably the critical piece. This is, of course, assuming that decor, internet, all the obvious technical things are in place.
Right on. Thank you, Brad. Todd.
Yeah, I concur with both of you. Mostly a really good plan. The internet is obvious. A good sounding room is obvious. A well-lit room and well-lit stage is obvious. But somebody having the vision of how this night's going to go, how you're going to mash 1 hour into, 3.5 hours, and where's that going to occur? And it's got to be a, 5 seconds of downtime at a podium in a live room is not a big deal. 5 seconds in a virtual stream of downtime is an eternity.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
has to be laid out. You can't say,
100%.
oh, I was on my way up let me go get my notes.
Totally. Thank you, Todd. Laurel, what do you say to what do you need in order to successfully execute one of these events?
Yeah, I mean, you can't say a plan enough, and time. It takes more time because you're planning two versions of the same event when you're having an in-person and a remote component, and so giving yourself enough time to be able to do all of those things. Yeah, I thought Todd made a really good point about, you know, things have changed and we've learned a lot of things from virtual events. And I hope to see all of that learning and that improvement reflect back on the in-person event. Like, there's no reason why the in-person event can't be just as punchy and fast-paced and fun as the virtual event has become, because the dead screen is so hard. But in the in-person event, you can have a great experience also by keeping things moving and keeping people entertained. So I hope to see that as an improvement to what we've been doing in the past.
Absolutely. I so agree with all of you. And I'll also say, for a successful fusion event, you really are, if you're thinking of the front end work as you're moving in, you're planning two separate and very different events. So give yourself enough time for that. And also give your vendors a lot of time because they're going to have to help you plan each event as well. So thank you for your responses on that. This moves us into FAQ4, which is what are the most common tech and/or streaming challenges to know about and consider before we go in? And I'm going to say an obvious one, internet speed and access. Like, for example, don't try to do a live stream from the basement of any building, like, please. Right? And Brad and Todd, I have you slated to answer this one. Brad, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, gosh, some of these things are, do kind of overlap, talking about essentially what would be needed, with regard to lighting, obviously with regard to internet, critical pieces. I think maybe one of the biggest things is specifically a hardline internet connection. Depending on the property, that can be something that is like a lot to ask for, where all the infrastructure is meant to be Wi-Fi and really for our best possible upload stream with the lowest latency on that network ping would be to have a hardline connection. So I think it's sort of a variation, but that's one critical piece I definitely watch for. And setup time, the ability to get in advance and to test and to be confident.
Absolutely. Very wise words. Thank you, Brad. Todd, what are the most common tech and or streaming challenges to know about or consider before deciding to do one of these?
Well, the hardline internet is obviously very important. Matter of fact, we don't do one without one. Secondly is prepping the client. This stage is going to look different than it did in days past. It's going to have studio lighting in front of it instead of Lecos at the back of the room. It's going to have cameras up close, because if we try and zoom in too much, we're going to have just a big old grainy broadcast. So technology needs to move in the space in a way it didn't before. And so having that client prepped for that and that their room looks different than it did to do a hybrid, I think is important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, such a true fact. Folks, I hope you realize the wealth of information you are getting from these people right now. So thank you for that. Our next frequently asked question is, what kind of internet speeds and connection will we need to have when streaming from anywhere other than a live stream studio? People ask me this all the time. So what are we looking for? Like, if we're going to try to secure our contract with our venue, what do we need to ask them before we say, yes, we can do this? Laurel, I'm actually going to let you go first on this one since you weren't in on that last round.
Sure. So when you're talking about bandwidth, you talk about up and down. And so with a hybrid event, up is more important. So being able to get the content out of the venue and out to your remote audiences versus down, which means that you're bringing things in. So maybe a remote participant is going to speak or be shown, to the in-person. That is a less important component, generally speaking. So we like to have, we'd love to have as much possible up, if we could be 20 up, that would be great, and asking your venue what that is and checking that with your AV team and making sure that that's going to work for the type of event that you're having before you sign the contract would be a very smart thing to do.
Yes, it would. Thank you, Laurel. Brad, do you have anything to add to what Laurel has already said?
No, I think really pretty similar. The factor on the network, of course, is simply, is everybody in the room taxing that network too? So yeah, if we can get in that neighborhood 15, 20 up, typically is safe, especially on a hard connection. And then, as far as download speed, so long as the space can handle more, for the guest user. I had that recently where a system had great redundancy, but it didn't have a lot of bandwidth. Everything was fine, but there was a lot of trepidation and concern for all involved. Is it going to handle greater giving? Is it going to handle the stream? What if the users come in and start checking their email or posting their photos? So,
and to kind of piggyback on that, I know this, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, folks, but what can venues do if they don't have exactly what you need? Like, what can you do to supplement internet and speed and connection and all that? Anybody jump in on this one, because I think people would love to know.
There's lots of technical solutions, and as always, they range in price. A most inexpensive solution would be just to have a hotspot there, but you can also bring in some technologies that will capture cell tower signal and be able to use that to broadcast out. And for some really big shows, this is probably beyond a nonprofit fundraiser, but you can bring in a separate vendor who all they do is provide the internet connection, and then you can feel most confident that that is going to work.
Right on. So really, you don't have to count a venue out necessarily. There's always a solution. It just depends on your budget. Is that what I heard? Awesome.
And a lot of times it makes sense to have a backup as well, right? So even bringing in a secondary stream from your AV vendor, so that if things do go down, you have a plan B.
Yeah, plan B is always a good idea. So thank you for your responses there. At this point, everybody, I think we need a little bit of brain butter for this one. So let's roll into our next poll question and think about 2022 right now. Are you most likely to A, host an in-person gala or fundraising event? This is next year again. Are you going to host a virtual fundraiser? Will you be hosting in 2022 a hybrid or fusion event or something else? And if you choose other, definitely take the time right now to answer the poll. But if you choose other, please drop what in the comments. We would love to know. So if all of you can just take a brief moment and let us know what your 2022 plans are in so far as planning fundraising events. And Anush, when you're ready and everybody has voted, we'd love to reveal the results. And oh, look at this, overwhelmingly 68% of you said you will be hosting a fusion fundraiser in 2022. This is great, folks. 0% said they would be hosting a totally virtual fundraiser in 2022. And 41% of you said you're just going right back to in-person. I don't want all this other stuff. So that's wonderful, wonderful results. And, for those of you who are our clients too, let us know, because we can tell you what's going on right now. So let's transition to our next frequently asked question. And this one is, how do you handle events where there are multiple satellite locations that are being brought in live? And I'm going to say, think hosted viewer watch parties from private homes or smaller venues, because I think that's mostly what's happening right now. But I'm going to actually give you each 30 seconds to answer this one. And Todd, I don't believe you've started yet. So how do you handle events where multiple satellite locations are being brought in live?
It's not really a problem for us. We have a proprietary call-in system that we use that gets us 1080p video from about anywhere with good audio.
Awesome.
We do a lot of corporate with it, especially we'll have panelists in sometimes 2 different countries and need to get them on at the same time.
Right on. Does the person who's sending you their stream need to do anything special?
Not typically. We've had Van Jones from CNN on, and he was just using his laptop. I mean, it's good if they have good lighting. We generally do a tech check with them ahead of time, just to see what they look like. And, you know, hey, maybe the kitchen's not so good. It's a little echoey. Can we try the living room where you got the big fuzzy couch?
Right. Got it. Got it.
But, you know, a lot of the technology has gotten so much better. Say the iPhone 12, beautiful video from that. We had Peter Jacobson come in from New York using nothing but his iPhone.
Wow. That's incredible.
He was on for an entire stream interacting in the studio.
That's
awesome. Yeah, we watch parties. We haven't brought in too much content from watch parties yet. Just because people in watch parties don't tend to be behaving COVID wise. And a lot of nonprofits don't want that on their stream.
Yeah.
Even if they are in the same family or, you know, stuff like that, it just, plus you never know what you're going to get. A lot of scripters don't want that surprise.
Amen to that. Brad or Laurel, do you have anything that you would add on to Todd's answer about handling multiple satellite locations?
I think the one thing I would piece in there is if you can really have a dedicated person at each site who is truly confident in what they're expected to do. You know, in the instances where we've done that and brought people in, seems like about 50% success rate where the people get it, they know what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. And then you say, all right, here we go, we're gonna go to you. And it's this. Okay,
Yes.
never mind. You know,
We've all seen that.
Yeah, so that's really hard, I think, for the planning side to say, okay, this is something we set aside for our strongest participants, people who we either can plant a tech at the site or just some way that we know that it's going to be as solid as possible. You know, similar to Tide, you know, we're invested pretty heavily into some broadcast boxes for a new tech product that's a Skype box that's used on, you know, The Voice and CNN and all those things. And that was something that, as we saw restrictions tighten, we knew high quality video, high quality audio without any of the peculiarities of Zoom or any of those things. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and a reputable provider can make that happen.
Right on. Thank you, Brad. Laurel, do you have anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I would recommend rehearsing beforehand, not trying to do candid shots because of the human element, and also because if you're streaming out a program that's being watched on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever the system is, you're going to have a latency on the other end. And so where you are in the studio shooting or in the in-person event is not where the person is that you're showing on the Zoom call, or whatever technology you're using, which is then real time. And so you need to know what it is that you want them to do, because they're not going to be in the same place that you are.
Right. Yeah, latency is a really big deal, and it seems to vary a lot through every kind of platform we've dealt with. So I can only imagine the pain in your neck that is tech people. So sorry that we try to make you do all that, but thank you for your answers. This moves us to our next frequently asked question, which is, do you travel for live streaming? Like, do you go on site? And if yes, how does this impact price? And Brad, I'm going to start with you. Todd, Laurel, you're up next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are more moving parts. You know, we've tried to price our in-studio streaming to be as affordable as possible for folks, so that as crazy as things are, organizations can continue to reach, you know, audiences. And so that's been the purpose there. As we see the on-site piece, it is more expensive, you know, to pack up the show and take it on site. You know, depending on what's being done, there are ways, of course, to capture it more simply than what we would do in studio, but definitely travel. We've been, you know, from Boise to Eugene, obviously, you know, still within the area, but you know, have traveled around. And I think that might be a photo of one of our laptops. So, you know, certainly done some off-site things too. So, yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I think you're right. That is a photo of one of your laptops. Did we do that on purpose?
Right.
Todd, you are on deck. Does the AV department travel for live streaming, and how does this impact price?
All the time. It impacts the price the way it always did with live events too. I have the same truck, the travel expenses, the same team expenses, the same hotel expenses. And so it's just on top of what our normal live stream is.
Got it.
At the early days of COVID, when restrictions were much, much tighter, it cost a lot more than it does now. We didn't have our COVID pods, as it were. And so if I sent 4 people to San Francisco, I literally had to send them in 4 cars. And you can't ask them to drive for more than 8 hours. So it literally took 2 days. That's when it really impacted the price. We're kind of back to what it was travel-wise, what it was pre-COVID.
Right on. Thank you, Todd. Laurel, does Seamless travel for live streaming, and how does it impact price?
We do. I mean, probably like everybody here, we've been doing streaming for years as a component of an in-person event. And so this last year, it was the event. And so that's not so different. I think the way the guys described it is exactly right. Like, if we incur more expenses, that becomes a more expensive end quote.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So folks, they all travel. It's just going to cost you. That's what I took from that. So thank you so much. This moves us to my favorite FAQ, and literally the one that I get probably every day, which I hope that they're kidding when they ask, but I know that many of them are not. But can't we just set up a webcam in the back of the room and call it good? The only thing I have to say to that is just please don't. Todd, Laurel, what do you have to say about that?
Well, what I said in your answer earlier still remains. You can set up a webcam in the room. You cannot call it good.
Is that your final answer? That is his final answer. I love it. Laurel, can't we just set up a webcam?
This is a tough thing because a lot of that is driven by budget concerns, right? And that is indeed probably the least expensive way, or maybe if you just put your laptop up in the back, that's the least expensive way of broadcasting out. And so I certainly have empathy for there is a finite amount of dollars in the budget. I think the watch out there is that in this last year, the things that we've all been able to experience in an event has shaped our expectations. And if you then go to a single wide shot of what is set up obviously to be an in-person event, the remote viewer is going to feel that and feel that, you know, they were a second class citizen. And so that's, you know, a hard thing, especially I'm sure with fundraising, you want everyone to feel like they're the most important person.
Yeah, you never want a donor to feel like an afterthought, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And I will also piggyback on all of this is, you know, I think one thing as fundraisers is we always have to consider our donors' experience with us, whether it's an email experience, a virtual experience, an in-person experience, what have you. If it's not positive, you know, we're not really stewarding our relationship well, and therefore we can't really count on, we're just going to have a lot of donor attrition, you know. So I would say if you're going to add a virtual component, make sure that it's a quality one, or just don't bother. So thank you so much. This moves us into, we're getting close, folks. This is number 9 of 10. Should we use paddles or bid numbers for the in-person crowd while the folks at home are virtually bidding with mobile bidding software? And Brad, Todd, Laurel, I'll let any of you take a shot at this one.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty straightforward thing to avoid, right? It'd be great to see that excitement and that activity, but the reality is, in order to try to keep the fundraising piece right all on one platform, get everybody using that mobile bidding option for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Todd or Laurel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I was just thinking about something you said to me a couple weeks ago, Misty, about that there are some people who they just love doing the paddle raise, and that's really important to them to be in this group and have the collective experience of bidding on auction items. And so I'm sure a lot of the organizations out there have people like that they know. And what I would recommend is having that opportunity, but not having that be a part of the virtual event. So maybe have like a smaller subset of items that you can do the paddle raise for, so that they can have that experience. The people that they really want to give money and they just miss having that experience, that they get to have it. But that, you know, there's not a practical way of making it fair and easily accessible for the remote audience. And so, you know, have your great video that, you know, of your message of your executive director talking about the cause that you can play during that time.
Great answer. Todd, anything you would like to piggyback on that? No. All right.
No, they got it.
Yeah, I will add from a fundraiser's perspective too, anything that makes it unequal with my donors, I don't love. I want all my donors to be treated, you know, with respect equally. And when you give one an advantage in the room with paddles, there's no latency there. They're right in front of me. They have an advantage now, so it is unequal. That said, I've done both, but I way prefer everybody on the same platform most of the time. So thank you for that. This brings us to the question I think we all probably get asked the very most. What is a price range or a fee structure when you're considering a fusion event? Is it actually twice as much money? So I'd like all of you to answer that in 30 seconds or less if you can. Laurel, you're shaking your head. Let's start with you.
I'm laughing because it's all, I'm going to say it depends, because it depends on so many different factors. I'll say it will be more expensive than if you do apples to apples, like the least expensive virtual option and the least expensive hybrid option where you have an in-person and a live stream is going to be more expensive. I think that that's just sort of, right, you're adding services. And so it is going to be more expensive. And then this question about what experience you want your various audience members to have and what they've come to expect. And it's going to be a tightrope. And that's one of the things that's kind of exciting about this time, is that we're all co-creating this together and coming up with creative solutions to be able to make everybody feel like they're part of this community and part of this event, no matter where they are.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Laurel. Todd, Brad, how do you do a price range or a fee structure for a virtual and an in-person? Is it twice as much?
No, but Laurel hit it on the head. It really depends. What kind of experience are you going to have? What kind of experience in the room and what kind of experience online? From strictly a technology standpoint, our deployment is very similar to where it was pre-COVID. A lot of the fee structure can come in, you know, after the technology is decided on, and you've got graphics, you've got all the other stuff. So yeah, we don't actually all know the answer to that question yet.
Right on. Thank you, Todd.
But we've,
Brad?
you know,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Todd. Oh no, he's muting now. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Brad.
I think the only thing I'd throw out, just to be really straight, is, you know, we just finished a hybrid event with a group that had probably one of the last really large events in our community on the Vancouver side in 2020 in February. And their pricing for the hybrid ended up being darn near exact what their 2020 event was, because it was prior to everything shutting down. They just had 100 people in the room, right? So you went from 700 to 100 plus online, another 150, however many, with watch parties and so on and so forth. So the audience, the way the audience looked changed, the size of the room changed, the size of the screens, you know, a lot of factors did change. But at the end of the day, ultimately it cost, in that case, about the same because of those considerations.
Got it. Well, thank you. What I'm hearing is really just contact these people, and tell them your event vision, and they can give you a better idea of what that might cost. But from our experience doing it, and from some of our peers from across the nation, we're experiencing about 1.7 times. It's not quite 2, but it's darn close. So thank you so much to our panelists for sticking through our 10 FAQs. I really appreciate all of your insight. I'm sure our viewers do as well. But I'd asked all the attendees to type questions into the chat. We have reserved a bit of time right now, and I'm just being handed, thank you so much, the magic questions. So at this point, Brad, Todd, and Laurel, we're going to put you up together, and this is going to kind of be speed round. I'd like you to just answer away. Okay, ready? All right. Quality for at-home viewers. Okay, these are pain points and concerns. So before I start asking questions, these were our people's pain points and concerns for their events. They were worried about the quality of at-home events for their viewers. What would that look like? Hosting 2 events. Do we have the manpower? How much does that cost? Great question. Best execution for an in-person and a remote event at the same time. We can talk, whoever that was, like, talk to me. I have some ideas. Are people like suffering from virtual event fatigue? Also a good question. Tickets, will people buy them? Yeah. Cancellation, in-person part of COVID, restrictions changing? Absolutely. All of these are very valid. Let's go into some questions now. To all of you, how do we provide a quality experience for both the in-person and the at-home viewers? How would you answer that?
I would say having somebody in the room that is there to bridge the gap is very important. So I think Brad mentioned this earlier, this idea of like a web host or a web MC, but being able to create the experience and hopefully bring the remote attendee more into the in-person. And also having some staff from the nonprofit or from your organization to help guide the in-person attendees to behave in a way that's friendly with the technology so that the remote viewer can participate. That's one of the things we've seen a lot with hybrid events, is that once you get in a room with like 20 other people, it feels like you're at an in-person event and you forget that, oh, I need to talk into the microphone, or the people that are at home can't hear me, and all of those things. And so having a wrangler to make sure that that keeps happening so that the remote attendee feels taken care of and feels part of the event is super important.
I love that you call them a wrangler. It's totally, and I love that you use the word behave, because it's so true. Brad, Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add to how do you provide a quality experience for both the in-person and the virtual viewers?
A really good plan.
Yeah. Amen. Todd's like famous for these like one-liners, and then he goes dark. That's awesome. Would it be better to host more of a virtual viewing parties in an in-person event? Would it be better to host more of a viewing parties in in-person event? What do you think? With everybody watching it.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. You know, definitely when you think about the makeup, you know, of a fundraising mix, and you think about, you know, sponsors that are helping to underwrite a program, but are also going to be part of maybe a match gift or whatever, that's a great, that person with a group of friends, almost when you think about, you know, who's at the such and such table. You know, it's really a great way to approach it, right? And it really helps build in an audience. Your viewing numbers might seem kind of low, but if you realize you have 8 people at the Jones household and they're giving money, you know, that's a great way to get that in-person feel and not be thinking about a venue moving off-site, you know, some of those other things. So I think that watch party, yet another hybrid within the styles.
Totally. Laurel, Todd, what do we think about viewing parties for in-person events?
We did an interesting one last year where it was almost an in-person event, but it was a virtual event. We did it as a drive-in gala. And so all the participants, well, all the viewers came to the drive-in, and we viewed the virtual event that we did at the drive-in.
That's kind of fun. I love it. Anybody want to add anything else to this one? No? All right. What are some ideas on what Fusion could look like? One day for both in-person and remote, viewing parties like a drive-in, to Todd's point. So let's talk about some variations. I think this is the question, is what, other than, you know, we're at a venue, we've got 100 people there and we've got the rest of our people at home, what else could we envision a Fusion or a hybrid event being? And so Todd just mentioned one, a drive-in. I've been working with some clients on just a lot of outdoor venues like wineries, polo fields, things like that, where we've got people outside. We've also got screens. We can pipe in other viewing parties. What else have you seen, Laurel, Brad?
I have an idea that we haven't executed yet, which is I would love to do a production party. I think it's so fun. Like, people love to see the behind the scenes and feel like they're part of the creation of the event. Like, maybe the in-person event is actually helping to build the components to make the end virtual event. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I love that idea. Folks, dear, this is like gold right here.
Right.
Brad, do you have any ideas for other alternative variations of Fusion or hybrid events?
You know, one thing that we saw a group do that was really creative here was specifically having a typical broadcast. And it was a brunch event too. So they had kind of mimosas and that whole morning brunch vibe, and a select number of folks that had bought bingo cards, physical bingo cards that were provided to them, jumped off onto a bingo thing after the fact. And so it gave that, the social where they were in a Zoom bingo for that moment, it gave that immediate interaction. They were able to chat each other, see the reactions. It was way fun in that way, but it didn't hold up the tight program. So we did a nice 35-minute quick wham bam thing, and they said, we'll see you on the other side. We were all here, and we dovetailed into that. It was a really fun example that I think was kind of neat.
That sounds really cool, actually, and kind of also killing two birds with one stone, because a lot of our clients, they miss the games and the other revenue streams that, you know, provide community and engagement and a little bit of fun for folks. So that's awesome. Yeah. We've got a great question here. So how do you handle the paddle raise at a Fusion event? How do you coordinate it? And I'm just going to step in here and I'm going to say, you can have all the virtual people using your mobile bidding software. You can have your people in the room either using mobile bidding software or using bid paddles, because there's no advantage to putting your card up earlier at a paddle raise. You're just donating money. So I don't look at it the same way as I look at a live auction scenario where somebody's at a disadvantage. But do you have anything that you'd like to add, panelists, to how do you handle a paddle raise at a Fusion event?
We actually did that a couple of times now. And mostly they're all going back to the mobile devices, because if nobody online knows who bidder number or paddle number 691 is, and also, like Brad said earlier, then their information never hits the stream, the giving site. And so they don't get their name on the screen and stuff like that.
They don't get equal love.
But proxy bidding can handle that, right? To have somebody entering those in.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Laurel, do you have anything you want to add about?
I was just thinking about if you are going to have a paddle raise, and again, that's an important thing for the person that's doing it, right? That's part of their experience. Then thinking about allowing the remote viewer to see that happening, right? So having a camera trained on the audience as part of that, you know, it feels like if you're going to do that, that's because it's a very important aspect of your event. And so spending a little bit of extra money to make sure everybody can kind of be part of the experience, I think would be really important.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, folks at home want to hear more about what proxy bidding is. So proxy bidding, from my point of view, is let's say my grandma, who doesn't get online and doesn't know how to use mobile bidding software, wants to give. Are we going to say, no, grandma, you can't give? Heck no. We're going to assign somebody trustworthy to go in on my grandma's behalf and make that gift for her. So that's a proxy bidding. It could be virtual, it could be in person, it could be by phone. We take proxy bids all sorts of different ways. So let's see, another question. Can we also add live stream on video to show who donates? This worked well for a live conference. Oh yes, absolutely. That depends on, well, two things. If you have mobile bidding software, many of them do that already intrinsically. And if you don't, or if you're not using one that does, there is a way to get names to scroll in a live stream from the tech side. Am I right, tech folks? Yes, all right.
Absolutely.
And then we've got a great question here. What is the most cost-effective way to do a Fusion event? What would you say to that? And I think this will be our last question because I think we're running a little late on time. So how would you keep a Fusion event cost effective?
I guess what I'll say is what I think is really amazing about the idea of a Fusion event is that you're being really thoughtful of both audiences and the experience that each audience is getting. And so you can have your in-person activities and event and capture some of that to show in the virtual event. But then when the virtual event happens, all the programming is all intentionally done for that audience. And that is the more cost-effective way of delivering high value to both audiences. It's much more cost-effective to break those two things apart than to try to do them concurrently. And so what I would say is the Fusion is the right way of being budget conscious and delivering a high end value to your various audiences.
Great answer. Brad, Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? How to keep a Fusion event cost effective?
Well, I suppose one, it depends on what's your definition of cost effective, because high production value does cost some money. Even prior to COVID, people would go, wow, production's really expensive. And my answer to that is no, it just costs a lot of money. But we're designing our systems for high production value at a reasonable price by sort of fusing them for the Fusion event. And that technology is still in development around here, but I think we're very, very close at being able to pull that off seamlessly.
Right. I love it.
Yeah, I know, I threw her one.
I was going to say, you just tied perfectly seamlessly. That's great. Brad, do you have any ideas?
Just one thought is, if you have the space, depending on the work that an organization does, if you have the space to do something on site and you can minimize a venue cost, that might be one, definitely one way to think a little different, reimagine your space, and I think always, is it too much on a portion of your space for that, or is it a good way to save a chunk of money? If we have to go somewhere as an AV provider and as as an auction company and all the different factors that come together, we may as well go to your house. So if that will hold your audience, and then we'll see you there.
Right on. Well, thank you so much to Todd, Brad, and Laurel for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us today as well. I hope you learned a ton. I know I did. Again, huge thanks to our fantastic panelists. We've got Brad from Wager Audio, we've got Laurel from Seamless Event Solutions, and Todd with the AV department. We really, really cannot say enough good things about all of them. So if you are hard up for a tech provider for any upcoming fundraising event, please reach out to them. Again, their contact information was on the slides at the beginning. A special thank you to today's tech partner who facilitated our webinar with Seamless Event Solutions. They put on today's roundtable discussion. And I'd also like to say thank you to Sarah, our ops manager, for managing just about everything.
Amazing anyway.
Yes, and she looks good doing it too. She has the cutest boots on today. But thank you all, and best of luck in your fundraising endeavors. I will see you next time at our next Fusion Fundraising webinar. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.